The crisp night air of the city was electric, 1,000 camera flashes, creating a constellation of artificial stars on the ground. This was the Zenith Gala, an event where fortunes were made and reputations were shattered with a single whispered comment. Tonight, Connor Prescott, a man who built his empire on audacity and ruthlessness, decided to shatter a reputation he thought he owned his wife's. He would utter words so cruel, so publicly devastating, that the gasps of the elite would be heard across the city. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that his wife's real story wasn't ending. It was just beginning, and her grand entrance was only seconds away. The ballroom of the Grand Sovereign Hotel was a symphony of excess. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small carriage, dripped light onto a sea of designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and blooming peonies, hummed with the low thrum of powerful conversations. Deals worth millions were being sketched onto cocktail napkins. Alliances were being forged over flutes of vintage champagne, and social hierarchies were being ruthlessly enforced with the subtlest of glances. At the center of one of the most powerful vortexes in the room stood Connor Prescott. He was a man carved from ambition and polished by success. His suit a custom. Tom Ford fit his broad shoulders perfectly, and his smile a practiced weapon flashed with predatory charm. He was the CEO of Prescott Holdings, a real estate behemoth that had devoured half the city's skyline. Tonight he was being honored with the Visionary of the Year award, and he bathed in the adulation like a king in sunlight. Tailing him a pace and a half behind, as always, was his wife, Beatrice. To the glittering assembly, Beatrice Prescott was little more than a beautiful silent accessory. She was dressed in a tasteful but unremarkable navy blue gown by a designer no one was clamoring to identify. Her auburn hair was styled in a simple chignon, and her jewelry, though clearly expensive, was demure. She was the ghost at the feast, a placeholder wife who fulfilled her duties by being present, pretty and perfectly quiet. She smiled when smiled at, nodded when spoken to, and her hand remained delicately on her husband's arm, a silent testament to his ownership. For 10 years this had been her life. She had met Connor when she was a promising architectural historian, full of passion for restoring the city's forgotten buildings. He had been captivated by her intellect and quiet grace. But after they married, he had systematically, lovingly dismantled her. Her career was deemed a cute hobby. Her opinions were charming but naive, and her world was slowly shrunk until it was confined to managing their sterile mansion, planning his social calendar, and ensuring his suits were always pressed. He had hollowed her out and filled the space with his own ego, calling it love. Tonight, the hollowness felt like a cavern. Connor, darling, a triumph. Lawrence Duval, the Gala's effervescent host and a notorious gossip columnist, air-kissed them both, though his eyes barely registered Beatrice. Prescott Holdings is simply unstoppable, and you brought your lovely shadow with you. Connor's smile widened, but it didn't reach his cold grey eyes. She's a testament to tradition. Lawrence, a supportive wife is the bedrock of any great man's success. Wouldn't you agree? He gave Beatrice's arm a proprietary squeeze, a gesture that looked affectionate to the world, but felt like a vice to her. She offered a tight, practiced smile. Congratulations on the award. Connor, it's well deserved. Her voice was soft, barely a murmur above the din. He ignored her, turning back to Lawrence. The Zenith Tower project is breaking ground next month. We're changing the face of this city." As he spoke, a younger woman slinked towards their circle. Her name was Lena Petrova, a model with eyes like chips of ice and a body that was currently poured into a shimmering, backless silver dress. She was Connor's latest and least discreet indiscretion. For months, the tabloids had been rife with photos of them leaving exclusive restaurants, boarding his private jet, their hands intertwined. Connor had never bothered to deny it. He seemed to relish the scandal. Lena slid up to Connor, completely ignoring Beatrice, and placed a perfectly manicured hand on his chest. "Connie, darling, you've been avoiding me." She purred, her voice a throaty whisper that carried an implicit promise. The circle of conversation went quiet. Everyone watched a delicious, high-stakes drama playing out before their very eyes. This was better than the auction, better than the award ceremony. This was raw social carnage. Connor, far from being embarrassed, seemed to swell with pride. He was staging this. This was a performance. He unwound Beatrice's hand from his arm, dropping it as if it were soiled. He turned to face her fully, his expression a mask of feigned pity. "Beatrice," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone in their vicinity to hear. The ambient chatter of the ballroom seemed to dip as if the room itself was holding its breath. "I think it's time we stopped this charade. Don't you?" Beatrice's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a key of bone. She stared at him, her placid mask finally cracking. She had known this was coming, of course. She had felt the tectonic plates of their marriage grinding towards this earthquake for months. But knowing and experiencing were two vastly different things. The sheer naked cruelty of it, done here in front of all these people. It stole the air from her lungs. "What are you talking about, Connor?" She managed, her voice trembling slightly. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Oh, please. Don't play the wounded dove. It's a tired act." He gestured vaguely at her. "Look at you. You're a relic, a placeholder. I need a woman who shines, who stands beside me as an equal in power and presence." He then dramatically pulled Lena to his side, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Like Lena. She understands the world we live in. She isn't afraid to take what she wants." The humiliation was a physical force, pressing in on Beatrice from all sides. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, some pitiful, some gleeful, all judging. She saw Connor's business partner, Desmond Shaw, wince from across the room, a flicker of disgust on his face before he looked away. "Our marriage?" Connor continued, his voice booming with theatrical finality, "has been a business arrangement for years. And I'm afraid, my dear, your contract has expired. You've become a liability. A boring, predictable, utterly passionless liability." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more venomous than his public proclamation. "My lawyers will be in touch tomorrow. Don't make a scene. Just fade away. It's what you're good at." With that, he turned his back on her. He took Lena's hand, raised it to his lips for a gallant kiss, and steered her towards the main stage where he was due to accept his award. The crowd parted for them, a mesmerized sea of whispers and shocked expressions. Beatrice stood alone in the space they had vacated. The circle of onlookers broke its members, scattering like roaches in the light, eager to spread the gossip. She was a pariah, a social leper. The camera flashes once aimed at the power couple now focused solely on her, capturing every detail of her public execution. Her composure, the carefully constructed dam that had held back a decade of quiet desperation, was crumbling. A single tear escaped, tracing a hot, shameful path down her cheek. She felt a hand on her shoulder and flinched, turning to see her driver, a man who had worked for them for 5 years, looking at her with profound pity. "Ma'am," he said softly, "should I bring the car around?" The car. Connor's black Mercedes. Her ride home to the empty mansion that had been her prison. The thought was unbearable. To leave like this, a discarded object, was to validate everything he had just said about her. She took a deep, shuddering breath, straightened her spine, and wiped the tear from her face with the back of her hand. Her eyes, which had been downcast and vacant for so long, suddenly ignited with a cold, clear fire. "No, Thomas," she said, her voice impossibly calm and steady. "That won't be necessary." She turned her gaze from the pitying driver to the grand entrance of the hotel, just as Connor was stepping onto the stage to a round of thunderous, hypocritical applause. She looked at the red carpet, at the throng of reporters and paparazzi still clustered outside, hungry for the next big arrival. And right on cue it came. The collective attention of the paparazzi who had been feasting on the scraps of Beatrice's humiliation was suddenly wrenched away. A new sound cut through the city night, a low, confident purr that spoke of unparalleled power and engineering. It wasn't the aggressive roar of a Lamborghini or the high-strung whine of a Ferrari. It was smoother, deeper, more profound. It was the sound of old money, of quiet authority. A vehicle was pulling up to the curb, moving with a regal slowness that commanded attention. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, but not just any Phantom. This was a bespoke model, painted in a shade of midnight blue, so deep it seemed to drink the light around it. The finish was flawless, the chrome accents gleaming like liquid silver under the streetlights. Its iconic Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament seemed to carve a path through the very air. This wasn't a car, it was a statement. It made every other luxury vehicle on the street look like a cheap toy. A hush fell over the reporters. Whispers broke out. Who was this? No one on the guest list was slated to arrive in such a vehicle. The tech billionaires, the oil tycoons, the Hollywood legends, they had all been accounted for. This was someone new. Someone more important. Inside the ballroom, the sound of Connor's acceptance speech began to falter. The guests nearest the entrance were turning their heads, their curiosity piqued by the commotion outside. Even from the stage, holding his heavy crystal award, Connor could sense the shift in the room's energy. His audience was being stolen from him. Annoyance flickered across his face. Beatrice remained perfectly still, a statue in the eye of the storm. Her gaze was locked on the vehicle outside. Her expression was unreadable, a calm, placid lake after a violent tempest. The Rolls-Royce came to a silent, perfect stop. The chauffeur, dressed in a crisp, dark grey uniform, exited the driver's side and moved with brisk efficiency to the rear passenger door. But he didn't open it. He stood at attention, waiting. Instead, the other rear door opened. Out stepped a man who was the human equivalent of the car he arrived in. He was in his early 60s, with a mane of distinguished silver hair and a face that spoke of sharp intelligence and zero tolerance for foolishness. He wore a Savile Row suit that was understated, yet screamed its expense. This was Mr. Gideon Cole, a man whose name was a legend in the highest echelons of corporate law and private equity, though he was so discreet and powerful that his face was known to only a select few. He shut the door behind him with a solid, definitive thump. He scanned the crowd of reporters with a look of withering disdain, and they instinctively took a step back, their cameras momentarily lowered. He adjusted his cufflinks, his movements precise and deliberate, and then he began to walk towards the entrance of the ballroom, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush red carpet. The hotel's head of security, a burly man named Peterson, moved to intercept him. "Sir, I'm sorry this is a private event." Your name, Gideon Cole, didn't even break his stride. He looked past the guard as if he were a piece of furniture. "I'm not here for the event. I'm here for my employer." His eyes swept over the opulent lobby and found their target. They landed on Beatrice. The entire lobby, which had been buzzing with gossip about the Prescott implosion, fell completely silent. All eyes followed Gideon's gaze. They saw him look past the titans of industry, past the society doyenne, past the mayor himself, and fix his attention on the discarded wife, the invisible woman standing alone in her simple navy dress. Gideon walked directly to her. He stopped a respectful 2 feet in front of her and gave a slight formal bow of his head. The gesture was one of profound deference, the kind an advisor gives to their monarch. "Madam Kensington," he said, his voice a rich, clear baritone that carried through the suddenly silent space. "I apologize for the delay." The traffic on the east side was more congested than anticipated. "Are you ready to proceed?" The name hung in the air, a puzzle everyone was desperately trying to solve. Kensington. Who was Kensington? Beatrice finally moved. The last vestiges of the timid, broken wife fell away from her like a shed skin. When she looked up at Gideon, her eyes were sharp, her posture commanding. She was no longer Beatrice Prescott, the shadow. She was someone else entirely. "It's quite all right, Gideon," she replied, her voice now possessing a resonance and authority no one in that room had ever heard from her. "My business here was concluded more swiftly than I expected." On the stage, Connor Prescott froze mid-sentence. His speech about future growth and market dominance died on his lips. He stared, his mouth slightly agape, at the scene unfolding by the entrance. He saw the car. He saw the imposing man. He saw them speaking to his Beatrice. It didn't compute. His brain scrambled to make sense of the impossible tableau. Gideon offered his arm to Beatrice. "The board members from the Tokyo Exchange have arrived. They are waiting for you in the Celestial Suite." Beatrice placed her hand on his arm. "Excellent. Let's not keep them waiting." Together they turned and began to walk towards the exit. They were no longer a man and a discarded woman, but a queen and her most trusted counsel. The crowd of elites parted for them instinctively, their shock and confusion palpable. Who was this woman? Where did Connor's mousy wife get a bespoke Rolls-Royce and an advisor who radiated more power than anyone in the room? And what was this talk of Tokyo board members? As she passed the foot of the stage, Beatrice paused. She turned her head and looked up at her husband for the first time since he had cast her aside. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She looked at him with a cool, detached assessment, the way a scientist might look at a specimen under a microscope. She gave him a small, enigmatic smile. It was a smile that held 10 years of secrets, a decade of silent planning. It was a smile that said, "You have no idea what you've just done." Then she turned and continued walking, leaving Connor standing on stage his Visionary of the Year award, suddenly feeling like a worthless piece of glass in his hand. The applause had died. Every eye in the room was now on his wife. His invisible, boring liability of a wife. He watched utterly dumbfounded as Gideon Cole held the door of the midnight blue Rolls-Royce open for her. She slid into the plush leather interior without a backward glance. Gideon got in the other side. The door closed with that same satisfying bank vault thud. The car purred to life and pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the city night with the quiet confidence of a predator leaving the scene of a successful hunt. Connor Prescott stood alone on his stage of triumph, utterly and completely eclipsed. The humiliation he had so carefully orchestrated for his wife had in a matter of seconds ricocheted back and hit him with the force of a wrecking ball. The gala was ruined. His moment was gone, and a terrifying, gut-wrenching question began to form in his mind. Who in the hell had he been married to for the last 10 years? The interior of the Rolls-Royce was a cocoon of silence and luxury. The chaos of the gala, the flashing cameras, the shocked faces, the rising crescendo of whispers faded into nothingness as the heavy door sealed them in. The seats were upholstered in the softest cream-colored leather, and the air smelled faintly of wood polish and success. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Beatrice allowed her shoulders to slump. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, letting out a breath she felt she'd been holding for a decade. Gideon Cole watched her, his expression softening from the stern mask he wore in public to one of genuine concern and admiration. "Are you all right, Beatrice?" he asked quietly. She opened her eyes, a wry smile touching her lips. "He called me a liability." Gideon, a boring, passionless liability. She laughed, a short, sharp sound, devoid of humor. "If he only knew." "He will," Gideon assured her. "Very soon. Everything is in place." The story of Beatrice Kensington did not begin 10 years ago when she married Connor Prescott. It began much earlier in a dusty, book-filled library under the tutelage of her grandfather, Alistair Kensington. Alistair was not just a historian. He was a titan of industry from a bygone era. The founder of the Kensington Trust, a global investment firm so powerful and discreet it operated in the shadows. Its influence felt in ripples rather than waves. He had built an empire on patience, strategy, and the unerring ability to see value where others saw none, in derelict buildings, in failing companies, in overlooked people. He had raised Beatrice after her parents died, instilling in her his sharp mind and his quiet, observant nature. While other girls her age were at debutante balls, Beatrice was in boardrooms listening silently as her grandfather negotiated multi-billion-dollar deals. He taught her to read a balance sheet like a novel and to understand the intricate dance of corporate warfare. Her passion for architectural history wasn't a whim. It was a manifestation of his teachings to see the hidden structure, the foundational strength beneath a crumbling facade. When she met Connor, she was managing a $20 million restoration project for the Trust, though her involvement was, as always, anonymous. Connor, an up-and-coming developer, was brash, ambitious, and utterly captivating. He saw her brilliance, but he misinterpreted it. He saw it not as something to respect, but as something to possess. And Beatrice, young and yearning for a life outside her grandfather's gilded but lonely world, fell for him. Alistair had warned her. "This man doesn't want a partner, my dear." The old man had said, his eyes wise and sad. "He wants a beautiful painting to hang on his wall. He will frame you, admire you, and then one day he will grow bored and replace you with a newer piece." She hadn't listened. She truly believed she could be both Beatrice Kensington's secret heiress and brilliant strategist, and Beatrice Prescott loving wife. For a time she was. In the first year of their marriage, she anonymously fed Connor information, guiding his fledgling company towards lucrative deals, helping him build his empire from the shadows. He attributed his Midas touch to his own genius, never once questioning the lucky tips or gut feelings that always paid off. Her grandfather passed away 2 years into her marriage, leaving her the sole heir and controlling stakeholder of the entire Kensington Trust, a fortune so vast it dwarfed Connor's burgeoning empire into insignificance. Her inheritance was structured with the utmost secrecy, managed by a board of loyalists her grandfather had handpicked, led by the formidable Gideon Cole. It was then that Connor began to change. With his success cemented his need for her charming opinions lessened. He began to resent her intelligence, to belittle her interests. He wanted a trophy, not a consultant. And so, for the sake of her marriage, for the quiet life she thought she wanted, Beatrice began to fade. She packed away her brilliance like a set of old silverware, bringing it out only in secret late at night in her private study, where she continued to run one of the world's most powerful investment firms through a series of encrypted networks and proxies, all under the simple anonymous moniker B. Kensington. The discovery of Connor's first affair 4 years ago had been the turning point. It wasn't the betrayal that broke her heart. It was the realization that her grandfather had been right. She was just a painting on his wall, and he was already shopping for a new one. But she didn't cry. She didn't confront him. Alistair Kensington had taught her that revenge is a dish best served cold on a silver platter in a public forum with devastating financial consequences. So she began to plan. Her first move was to use the Trust's immense resources to investigate every facet of Connor's life and business. She discovered his finances were a house of cards built on risky loans and inflated valuations. His Zenith Tower project, the jewel in his crown, was leveraged to the hilt. He was desperate for a massive infusion of capital, and he had been courting a mysterious foreign investor for months. That investor, of course, was B. Kensington. Her second move was Lena Petrova. Beatrice had found the aspiring model during a deep dive into Connor's expenditures. Lena was struggling in debt and had a fierce, ambitious intelligence that Connor mistook for simple greed. Beatrice, through a third party, made Lena an offer she couldn't refuse: a multi-million-dollar trust fund and a legitimate modeling contract in exchange for becoming Beatrice's eyes and ears. Lena was to play the part of the devoted mistress, all while feeding every bit of Connor's pillow talk, every secret business plan, every panicked late-night phone call directly back to Beatrice. It was Lena who confirmed just how precarious Connor's financial situation was. It was Lena who reported that Connor was planning to publicly divorce Beatrice at the Gala, believing the scandal and his new arm candy would make him appear more virile and powerful to the investors he was trying to woo. The final piece was the Gala itself. Beatrice had orchestrated the entire evening. Using her influence as B. Kensington, she had leaned on the event committee to ensure Connor won the Visionary of the Year award, inflating his ego to its most spectacular and vulnerable point. She knew he would be unable to resist such a perfect stage for his grand betrayal. Lena performed her role admirably. Gideon commented, pulling Beatrice from her reverie as he checked a message on his phone. She has already transferred the recordings of Mr. Prescott's recent phone calls. It seems he was attempting to illegally short-sell stock in a rival company using insider information. The SEC will be most interested. Beatrice nodded, a cold satisfaction settling in her. He always was sloppy when he got arrogant. The Rolls-Royce didn't go to the Celestial Suite. There were no board members from Tokyo. That was merely a line for the theater of the ballroom. Instead, the car wound its way through the city streets until it pulled up before a magnificent, restored brownstone in the city's most exclusive historical district. This was her home. Not the cold, modernist mansion she shared with Connor, but a building she had personally bought and restored years ago. Her first secret act of defiance. It was her sanctuary, her war room. Inside, a team was waiting. Analysts, lawyers, and public relations experts looked up from a bank of monitors as she entered. The screens were filled with data streams, stock tickers, and news feeds, all tracking the fallout from the gala. A young woman with a headset hurried over. "Madam Kensington, the initial reports are flooding in. Mystery woman upstages Prescott. Prescott's wife's shocking exit. The narrative is shifting entirely in your favor. We're amplifying it through our partner networks now." Beatrice took off the simple wrap that had accompanied her navy dress. Underneath the dress was a canvas. Her team was her armor. "What's the status of Prescott Holdings' stock in after-hours trading?" A man at a large monitor answered. "It's already down 9%, based on the rumors alone. When the markets open in Tokyo, in 2 hours, your short positions will activate. By the time New York wakes up, his net worth will have been cut in half." Beatrice walked to the large window overlooking the quiet, tree-lined street. The city lights glowed in the distance. For 10 years, she had lived in the shadows, letting a lesser man take credit for her intellect and diminish her worth. She had played the part of the ghost, the placeholder, the liability. "No more. Gideon," she said, her voice ringing with newfound clarity. "Prepare the offer. I want to buy the controlling interest in Prescott Holdings." Gideon smiled. "I already have it drafted. I assume you wish to purchase it for a significant discount." Beatrice watched a lone taxi drive down the street below. "No," she replied. "I want to buy it for pennies on the dollar. I'm not just taking back my life, Gideon. I'm taking back my city, and I'll do it using the ruins of the empire he thought he built." The architect was finally ready to unveil her own design. The sun rose over the city, its golden light glinting off the glass and steel of the skyscrapers, towers that, until last night, Connor Prescott had considered his kingdom. This morning, however, the light felt accusatory. It streamed into his penthouse office on the 80th floor of the original Prescott Tower, illuminating the chaos of his mind. He hadn't slept. After stumbling off the stage in a daze, he had been hounded by reporters, their questions a barrage of machine gun fire. Who was that man? Mr. Prescott. "What is Kensington? Is your wife leaving you for someone richer?" He had pushed through them, his face a thunderous mask, and fled. His calls to Beatrice's phone went straight to a disconnected message. The GPS tracker on her car showed it hadn't moved from the hotel garage. She had vanished. He paced his office, a caged animal. The Crystal Award from the Gala sat on the edge of his massive mahogany desk, mocking him. His triumph had turned to ash in his mouth. He replayed the scene over and over, the Rolls-Royce, the deferential silver-haired man, and Beatrice's final chilling smile. It was impossible. Beatrice was Beatrice. She organized dinner parties. She picked out his ties. She didn't have powerful friends or secret resources. Her family was long gone. Her inheritance had been a modest sum they'd used for a down payment on their first home. Or so he thought. His intercom buzzed, startling him. "Mr. Prescott," his assistant's nervous voice crackled through. "Mr. Shaw is here to see you. He says it's urgent." "Send him in." Connor barked. Desmond Shaw entered, his face grim. Desmond was his partner, the steady, cautious numbers man to Connor's daring visionary. He was also the closest thing Connor had to a friend, though their relationship was built more on mutual profit than genuine affection. "What a mess," Connor Desmond said, foregoing any pleasantries as he loosened his tie. "The board is in a panic. Our primary lenders have already called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. The gossip from the Gala is everywhere, and the uncertainty is spooking the market. Our pre-market stock is in free fall." Connor waved a dismissive hand. "It's a domestic squabble, Des. It'll blow over. I'll release a statement. We'll say she had a breakdown, that she's emotionally unstable. We'll control the narrative." Desmond stared at him aghast. "A breakdown?" "Connor, did you see that car? Did you see the man she was with? That was Gideon Cole." The name meant nothing to Connor. "Who?" "Gideon Cole." Desmond repeated, his voice strained with disbelief at Connor's ignorance. "He's the lead counsel and primary operator for the Kensington Trust. He's a ghost, a legend. He manages one of the most powerful and secretive private equity firms on the planet. They operate with complete anonymity. If he shows up personally, it's because something monumental is happening." A cold dread began to seep into Connor's bones, far colder than the hangover from the champagne he'd drunk in celebration. Kensington Trust. What does that have to do with Beatrice, I don't know. But that's the name he called her. Wasn't it Madam Kensington? Before Connor could process this, his assistant buzzed again, her voice now trembling with panic. "Sir, you have a visitor. A Mr. Cole. He says he has an appointment." Connor and Desmond exchanged a look of stunned horror. "I don't have an appointment with any—" Connor began, but it was too late. The double doors to his office swung open. Gideon Cole strode in, flanked by two sharp-suited junior associates carrying briefcases. He moved with an unhurried, predatory grace, his eyes taking in the opulent office with a flicker of amusement, as if it were a child's playroom. Prescott Gideon said, his voice as smooth and hard as marble. "Thank you for seeing us. I am Gideon Cole. I represent the interests of B. Kensington." The name hit Connor like a physical blow. B. Kensington. The mysterious, absurdly wealthy foreign investor he had been desperately courting for the past 6 months. The investor who was the last and only hope to save the over-leveraged Zenith Tower project, and by extension his entire company. He had been so close to closing the deal, a $500 million capital infusion, that would solve all his problems. You represent B. Kensington," Connor stammered, trying to regain his footing. He straightened his tie, puffing out his chest in a desperate attempt to project the authority he felt rapidly slipping away. "Well, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I was expecting to hear from your people today to finalize our agreement." Gideon's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Our agreement is indeed what I am here to discuss. However, the terms have changed." He placed his briefcase on Connor's desk and opened it with a precise click. "B. Kensington has been monitoring the performance and leadership of Prescott Holdings closely. And in light of recent events, both professional and personal, our confidence in your stewardship has been fatally undermined." From the briefcase, he produced a single, elegantly bound document and slid it across the polished mahogany. "This is not a funding proposal, Mr. Prescott. This is a buyout offer." Connor stared at the document as if it were a snake. He snatched it up his hands, trembling slightly. His eyes scanned the first page. his face growing alour with every word he read. The Kensington Trust, on behalf of its principal B. Kensington, was offering to buy a controlling 51% stake in Prescott Holdings. The offer price wasn't just low, it was insulting. It was a fraction of the company's market value from the previous day. It was a predator's price offered for a wounded animal. "This is ludicrous," Connor exploded, slamming the proposal down on the desk. "This is an outrage. We had a deal, you can't just—" "We had a preliminary discussion," Gideon corrected him coolly. "Nothing was signed. And since that discussion, our due diligence has uncovered irregularities." He nodded to one of his associates, who opened another briefcase. "Fraudulent asset valuations, questionable accounting practices, not to mention a pending SEC investigation into insider trading. We have a rather comprehensive file." Desmond Shaw looked like he was going to be sick. He sank into one of the leather chairs, his face ashen. He knew about the creative accounting, the corners they had cut. He had warned Connor against it. Connor felt the walls of his office, his 80-floor fortress, closing in. He was trapped. He looked from Gideon's implacable face to the damning document on his desk. One question screamed in his mind. "Who?" he growled, leaning over his desk, his voice a low threat. "Who is B. Kensington? Who is doing this to me?" Gideon. Cole allowed the silence to stretch to fill the room with Connor's impotent fury. He savored the moment, the culmination of a 4-year plan. "I believe you know her," he said softly. "You called her predictable, boring, a liability." The realization dawned on Connor, not like a sunrise, but like a building collapsing on top of him. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. B. Kensington. Beatrice. His Beatrice. The mousy, quiet woman he had discarded like trash. The intercom buzzed for a third time. His assistant's voice was barely a whisper. "Mr. Prescott, your mother." "Mrs. Margaret Prescott is on line 1. She says the family accounts have been frozen." Gideon Cole simply smiled. "Ah, yes. We did that an hour ago. Collateral. It was all in the prenuptial agreement he made her sign, the one his own lawyers drafted to protect his assets." He looked directly at Connor, his eyes glinting with triumph. "Your wife, Mr. Prescott, is a most meticulous reader of the fine print." Connor. Prescott, the visionary of the year. The king of the city skyline finally understood. He hadn't just divorced his wife. He had declared war on an empress, and he had just learned he was armed with nothing but a plastic fork. He collapsed into his chair, the billion-dollar view from his window, suddenly looking like a long, long way down. The news of Beatrice Kensington's hostile takeover of Prescott Holdings spread through the financial world like a wildfire. It was the story of the decade, the quiet, unassuming socialite who was secretly a corporate titan, orchestrating the public downfall of the husband who had scorned her. The media, which had feasted on her humiliation just a day before, now lauded her as a brilliant strategist, a feminist icon, a corporate avenger. Her face was on the cover of every financial journal, her story leading every news broadcast. She had not only controlled the narrative, as Connor had arrogantly planned to do, she had become the narrative. From her command center in the restored brownstone, Beatrice directed the assault with surgical precision. She didn't give a single interview. She didn't need to. The actions of the Kensington Trust spoke for themselves. They executed a classic bear hug maneuver, making the insultingly low offer public, while simultaneously releasing select, damaging pieces of information about Prescott Holdings' financial instability to key market influencers. The stock already wounded hemorrhaged value. Investors panicked. Lenders who had once tripped over themselves to finance Connor's projects were now calling in their loans. Connor, meanwhile, was in a state of escalating panic. His first reaction was denial, followed by rage. He stormed out of his office after Gideon Cole left, screaming at his assistant, vowing to fight this, to crush Beatrice. He called his lawyers only to be told that the prenuptial agreement he'd forced on her was ironclad. It had a clause which he'd never bothered to read closely, stating that in the event of public infidelity leading to a divorce, any assets commingled or leveraged against shared property would be subject to review and potential seizure by the non-offending party's estate. His lawyers had assumed her estate was negligible. They had no idea it was the Kensington Trust. Beatrice had used his own weapon against him. His next call was to his mother. Margaret Prescott was a formidable woman, a steel magnolia who believed the Prescott name was sacrosanct. She had always treated Beatrice with a thinly veiled condescension, viewing her as a pretty but common addition to their dynasty. "This is an outrage," Margaret shrieked over the phone. "That little gutter snipe is freezing my accounts. The ones your father left me. You march over to wherever she is hiding and you put an end to this nonsense right now, Connor. Remind her of her place, fueled by his mother's fury." Connor drove to the mansion he had shared with Beatrice, thinking he could confront her there. He found the locks changed. A private security team, polite but immovable, stood at the gates. They informed him that this property was now under the sole ownership of Madame Kensington, as per the terms of the prenup, since the mortgage had been secured using a joint account. He was denied entry to his own home. Desperation began to set in. He tried to rally his allies on the board, but found his support evaporating. Desmond Shaw, his own partner, was now distant and non-committal. Desmond had spent the previous evening doing his own research into the Kensington Trust, and the scale of its power had left him breathless and terrified. He had always harbored a quiet respect for Beatrice, sensing a sharp intellect beneath her placid exterior. He'd seen how Connor treated her, and while he'd never interfered, it had left a sour taste. This was not a fight they could win. It was a reckoning they deserved. Finally, Connor did the one thing he swore he would never do. He humbled himself. He got Beatrice's new number from a mutual acquaintance and called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm and cool. "Connor." Not a question, but a statement. "Beatrice. Bea. Please." He began the unfamiliar act of pleading, feeling like acid in his throat. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. This is our life, our history you're destroying." "I'm not destroying anything, Connor," she replied, her voice even. "I'm renovating. You built a house on a rotten foundation. I'm simply clearing the plot for new construction. This is about the Gala, isn't it? About Lena." He pressed desperately, searching for an angle. "I'm sorry. Okay, I was an arrogant fool. I was trying to impress the investors. Our investors, it turns out. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can put the company back together." A soft, mirthless laugh came through the phone. "Counseling. You think this can be fixed with counseling? This was never about Lena Connor. She was a business transaction. This is about 10 years of being suffocated. 10 years of you dismissing me, belittling me, and systematically erasing every part of me that wasn't a reflection of you. You didn't just cheat on me, Connor. You tried to annihilate me. You just weren't very good at it." His desperation curdled back into anger. "You think you can run my company? You who spent the last decade planning luncheons. You'll run it into the ground." "That's where you're wrong," she said. and he could almost hear the smile in her voice. You see, while I was planning those luncheons, I was also managing a global portfolio worth 50 times what your little real estate empire could ever hope to be. While I was picking out your ties, I was orchestrating hostile takeovers in the Asian market. While I was smiling silently by your side, I was learning every single one of your weaknesses. You didn't have a wife, Connor. You had a master strategist living in your house, and you were too arrogant to ever see it. The call ended. Connor was left in a stunned silence, the full scope of his miscalculation crashing down on him. Meanwhile, Desmond Shaw made a decision. He couldn't save Connor, but he might be able to save the company and its thousands of employees. He contacted Gideon Cole's office and requested a meeting with Beatrice. He was brought to the brownstone, and as he was led into the bustling command center, he was struck by the quiet, focused efficiency of the operation. At its center was Beatrice, no longer the timid wife he knew, but a commander in her element, giving clear, decisive orders. Mr. Shaw, she said, turning to him. Her eyes were not vengeful, but clear and appraising. Thank you for coming. Beatrice, Madam Kensington, he stammered. I came to tell you that I was never a party to Connor's personal actions, and I was against many of his riskier financial strategies. I have the documents to prove it. The company itself, the core assets, they're strong. It was his leadership that was the problem. Beatrice nodded slowly. I know, Desmond. I've reviewed your records. You consistently advised caution. He consistently ignored you. She gestured to a chair. The Kensington Trust isn't a demolition crew. We are builders. I have no intention of destroying Prescott Holdings. I intend to absorb it, restructure it, and make it profitable and stable. But to do that, it needs leadership that understands its true value. Leadership it can trust. An unspoken offer hung in the air between them. Desmond saw his chance, a lifeline. I can provide that, he said earnestly. I know this company inside and out. I can help you transition. I'll work for you. Beatrice gave him a long, thoughtful look. Your loyalty to Connor has been noted, she said. But so has your competence. We may have a place for you in the new Kensington Prescott entity. But first there is one more thing I need. She slid a file across the table. These are the preliminary plans and unrecorded liabilities for the Zenith Tower project. I know Connor kept a second set of books, a secret ledger detailing the bribes, the corner cutting on materials, the real numbers. I need it. It's the last piece of leverage I require to ensure his complete and unconditional surrender. Desmond swallowed hard. He knew exactly where that ledger was. Giving it to her would be the final, ultimate betrayal of his partner. But it would also be the salvation of the company he had helped build. His loyalty was to the 5,000 employees, not to the arrogant man who had led them all to the brink of ruin. He met her gaze, a silent contract passing between them. I know where it is, he said. With Desmond Shaw's allegiance secured and the secret ledger in her possession, Beatrice had all the ammunition she needed. The ledger was a Pandora's box of corporate malfeasance, detailing everything from bribes to the deliberate, dangerous use of substandard materials in the Zenith Tower. It was enough to send Connor to prison for decades, but Beatrice didn't want him in prison. She wanted something more thorough, a public spectacle, where he would be forced to dismantle his own legacy piece by painful piece. Gideon Cole drafted the final offer, a masterpiece of legal entrapment. On the surface, it looked like a lifeline. The Kensington Trust would purchase the Zenith Tower project, injecting Prescott Holdings with enough capital to stabilize it. In return, Connor would step down as CEO, avoiding financial ruin and criminal charges with a comfortable severance package. The trap was buried deep within the fine print. By signing, Connor was legally bound to preside over a final press conference and give a full and frank accounting of his failures, reading from a prepared statement drafted by Beatrice's team. It was a confession disguised as a corporate press release. He had a choice: public humiliation or federal prison. Gideon presented the offer to a haggard and defeated Connor. The moment he heard he could avoid prison and walk away with millions. A flicker of the old arrogance returned. He saw an escape route, a way to spin this. He could rebuild. "He has to read a statement," his lawyer asked, frowning at the clause. A formality Gideon said smoothly, showing him a heavily redacted version. The final text will be provided on the teleprompter. Blinded by greed and desperation, Connor didn't care about some boring speech. "Fine, whatever." "Where do I sign?" he snapped. He scrawled his signature, sealing his own fate. The press conference was set for 2 days later in the atrium of Prescott Tower. While the media worked itself into a frenzy, Beatrice worked quietly. She and Desmond Shaw created a new ethical business plan for the restructured company, which would be renamed the Kensington Shaw Group. She met with union leaders, guaranteeing jobs and restoring the pensions Connor had raided. She was not just tearing down, she was building up. On the morning of the press conference, Lena Petrova arrived at the brownstone. She looked tired but relieved as she handed Beatrice a small flash drive. "This is the last of it," Lena said. "Audio of him bragging about how he was going to destroy you, how you were too stupid to have ever made him sign a decent prenup." Beatrice took the drive. "You've done well, Lena. The funds are in your account. Go have a wonderful life." As Lena left, Gideon entered, holding a stunning dark red power suit. It was her armor for the final battle. "It's time, Beatrice," he said softly. She stood and put on the jacket, looking at her reflection in the window. The timid ghost was gone forever. In her place stood a queen, ready to claim her kingdom. "Let's go," said Beatrice Kensington. "It's time for the visionary of the year to give his final performance." The atrium of Prescott Tower was a media circus. A forest of microphones and cameras was aimed at the podium, all waiting for the final act. Connor Prescott walked onto the stage, a ghost in a bespoke suit. The tremor in his hands betrayed the crushing pressure he was under as he attempted a charming smile that came out as a grimace. He stood at the podium, his eyes finding the teleprompter. He began reading the standard corporate platitudes, his confidence momentarily returning. This was easy. He could spin this. Then the script changed. "This partnership has become necessary, due to a series of catastrophic leadership failures on my part." Connor stopped, his blood running cold. This wasn't the script. He looked for his lawyers, but saw them locked in a hushed conversation with Gideon Cole, who simply smiled. He was trapped. He had signed a legally binding contract. If he stopped, the deal was off, and the full weight of the ledger would come crashing down. Sweat beaded on his forehead. With a voice now strained and shaky, he continued confessing to everything. These failures include the deliberate misrepresentation of company assets and the cultivation of a corporate culture that prioritized reckless expansion over fiscal responsibility. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. My ambition led me to approve cost-cutting measures that could have endangered public safety. I was derelict in my duty. He was reading his own corporate obituary. Just as he thought the humiliation couldn't deepen, a set of doors opened. Beatrice Kensington entered a vision of power in a crimson suit, flanked by Desmond Shaw. The The cameras swiveled from the broken man on stage to the formidable woman who had replaced him. She walked directly to the stage and stood beside him, a silent, powerful presence. The teleprompter fed Connor his final devastating lines. And so, with immediate effect, I am stepping down as CEO. I leave the company in the capable hands of its new leadership. As he finished, the Prescott Holdings logo on the screen behind him dissolved, replaced by a new elegant design, Kensington Shore Group. Beatrice stepped forward to the microphones, her voice strong and clear. "Thank you, Connor, for your candor," she began, the irony sharp as glass. "The Kensington Shore Group is committed to a new era of integrity. Our first act will be to halt the Zenith Tower project and conduct a full independent structural audit. We will not build a monument to ego on a foundation of lies." She looked directly at the press. "There has been much speculation about my personal life. Let me be clear. My story is not one of a woman scorned. It is the story of a woman who has taken back what is hers. For too long, my contributions were made in the shadows. Today, I am simply stepping into the light." Suddenly, an audio file played over the atrium's PA system. Connor's voice, grainy and unmistakable, from Lena's recording. "Going to destroy her." His voice echoed. "Leave her with nothing. She was too stupid to have ever made me sign a decent prenup." It was the final nail in his coffin. The last shred of public sympathy vanished. Beatrice let the recording play for a few more seconds before signaling for it to be cut. She looked at the hollowed-out shell of the man beside her, feeling not hatred, but a quiet, final sense of closure. She leaned towards the microphone for her last words. "Some men believe a woman's place is in their shadow. They are mistaken. Her place is on the throne." She turned and walked off the stage with Desmond, leaving Connor alone in the blinding glare of the camera flashes. His empire was gone, his name disgraced. He had tried to publicly humiliate his wife and had instead orchestrated his own spectacular self-destruction. As Beatrice walked into her new future, she didn't look back once. And so the reign of Connor Prescott ended not with a bang, but with a forced, humiliating confession. He learned the hard way that the person you underestimate the most can often be the one holding all the cards. Beatrice's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't always loud and aggressive. Sometimes it's the quiet, meticulous patience of a brilliant mind waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She didn't just get revenge. She built a better future from the ashes of a toxic past, proving that the best way to overcome a bully is to buy his company and rewrite his legacy. What did you think of Beatrice's incredible takedown? Was it a masterclass in strategy or a cold, calculated revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of triumph and spectacular karma, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more tales of justice and dramatic twists. Thank you for listening.